Hey everyone, this is Curb Knight bringing you another standard match. Today we have the return of another fan favorite, my Magnolia deck. This time we are in fact playing the Grade 4. So for today's match we are going to be going up against Ava, going up against QA, one of a really good player from our locals. So we'll take a look at what Ava looks like just on the eve of even fall, I guess. BT11. Anyways, we do see Ava just starting out with the standard things. We did actually search the Blue Research Lab, or Blue World, I suppose, and add that instead of the grade 1 because we did already have the grade 1 in hand. He's going to be swinging at the Vanguard, hitting into a heal trigger, and my opponent is also going to be hitting into a heal trigger. So we've already got 2 heals out the game, completely wasted from both of us. But now we're going to be riding into the grade 2 Ava, this time actually searching out that grade 1. So we will be able to just activate that, and then once we get to that grade 3, we are going to be hitting that all-important 3 research orders in the order zone. So just going to be playing out that grade 1 order. Once again, looks like we are actually going to be committing one of the grade 2 Obscadades. Going to be doing a little bit of rushing. The Ava's going to be swinging, just going to hit it with a 2 to pass. But unfortunately, we do see them hitting into a heal trigger, which of course is going to let them heal back down to 0. The Obfuscate's just going to swing at the Vanguard. I'm just going to be taking it because I don't really want to commit another 15k shield, and it's perfectly fine to just take it. It's just 1 damage. So you do see one of the interesting things about my mag list. I'll talk about this in the deck profile, that I am actually playing the Flagberg ride line, just because it does allow you to get a lot of free rears, and we'll talk a little bit more about it a little bit later. But as we did see a defensive, I think that was yet another heal coming on down. We saw KWay putting the power on the rear guard, actually, probably because he wants 2 CB for going into this turn. I did consider for a second whether I should give him that 2 CB, but I think when you're up against a deck like Ava, you do kind of want to pressure them as much as possible, and the higher damage I can push Ava to as fast as I can, the more that my 6 attacks are going to be taking a serious toll on his hand. But we do see the Blue Research Lab actually played and actually hitting a grade 3 Obscadade off of the top, meaning that it is going to be called and getting that critical. We do see the Ava skill used here with that 1 CB, checking the top 3 and adding 1 of those cards to the hand. So we are pretty set up in this situation to just swing. We do have the Obscadate with the 1 crit, and then we do also have the other Obscadate. Now, it's not too threatening since I was able to guard early. I do have that inroad shooter who is an intercept, which is, this is the only turn he is going to actually be an intercept. We do see the Blue Research Lab being used, giving the power to the Ava, interestingly enough. But it does make sense since the 2 Obscades are already swinging for nice numbers. This one's swinging for the 15 since we did finally get to the 3 face-up research orders. It is going to be met by a draw trigger, which is actually being very good for me, or is seeing the Ava skill here used to counterblast 1 and soul blast 1 to call out another Obscadade. Going to be that grade 3 Obscadade, which is obviously going to be getting the critical since it was called by a card effect. So I'm kind of thinking about what I want to do here. If I hit it with a 15k, it would be a 2 to pass, but I'm going to opt to just take this. We are going to see grade 3 Obscadade and the cycle card coming on down, and I am actually going to be hitting into another defensive draw trigger, meaning that neither of these Obscadades are going to be able to hit. So a very beneficial play for me. I was able to draw 2 cards and basically blank 2 attacks thanks to those double defensives. But of course, I am going into this with a completely blank board, but we do have a lot of things. Now, this is one of the cool interactions that grade 4 Magnolia actually has. Since I placed the Magnolia, I can use the skill of the Doyle Goat, or the Goyle Doe, excuse me, to put it into the soul, and then I can actually chain Ascendance Assault skill, which is when it's rode upon, you can Soul Blast 1 and call it out. So you Soul Blast out the Goat, and then that actually allows you to proc the skill of the other Goat. I'm actually not going to be using it here because, as we're going to be seeing, I'm going to be doubling it anyway, and I'm not going to be staying on grade 3 Magnolia very soon anyways. But we do see the Forbididol coming on down, which is just an amazing card. I'm going to be calling out an Inlet Pulse and adding a Magnolia Elder to my hands, just like a straight +1. Very, very good card. I love that card. One of the best additions from Festival Booster. But we are going to be calling another new card, which is going to be that Friendship Fairy, the promo from, I believe, last month? No, it's actually this month. And then we're going to Counterblast 1, which allows us to Superior Ride the Magnolia Elder from hand. Now we're going to be using the skill of both Doyle Goats, or Goyle Dotes. I keep messing it up. Anyways, we're going to use a skill of 1 to put into Soul, give Magnolia an extra 5k, and then using the skill of Magnolia Elder, I can actually call out the Goyle Dote that I just put into the Soul, and then since I am still in the on-place period, I can use the skill of the other Goyle Dote in order to put itself in the Soul and give my Vanguard another 5k. So I'm not going to be, I don't really have the cards to commit a full board here, but I am just going to go for 5 attacks here with all my entire board. So the Ascend Salt, I like putting the cards that cannot hit over defensives in the back row. As we're going to be seeing here, I'm going to be seeing the 15 because it's going to be the weakest. Next up, I'm going to be seeing the Inlet Pulse and the other Inlet Pulse, because at this point, I think I have 2 front triggers in my hand, and I only play 3 in the deck, so my chances of hitting a front trigger are pretty low. But as we're going to be seeing, a critical trigger coming on down, and a front trigger. So if I had actually been able to hit swing with my Vanguard first, I would have been giving my entire Inlet Pulses an extra 10k, which would have been pretty great. But as we are going to be seeing, the 4th damage is going to be an OT, so my entire turn is kind of just blank there. But we are seeing myself basically getting rid of my entire board. The Goyle Dote retires itself after it attacks to draw a card, and then obviously since I attack 4 more times this turn, both Inlet Pulses are going to be putting themselves into the Soul and drawing me another 2 cards. So very, very bulky Magnolia. I have a ton of cards in hand. Honestly, it makes me feel like I'm playing Great Nature sometimes. But Ava's obviously going to be coming on back. It can still do a lot of things. We did take quite a few cards out of hand there, but thanks to that OT, they are spared from some more cards. But we do see the, what's that called? Halibay something? It flashed up on screen. You know what I'm talking about. We did start the turn off with a Persona Ride. So using the skill to Counterblast 1, search out a order, the grade 2 order, and then for this turn, the next order you play is free, and you can play a total of 2 orders. So the first one is going to be played without the Counterblast 1, lets you draw 1 card, and then playing another blue Research Lab and calling out the grade 2 Obfuscate, which is not really going to be very beneficial considering that, you know, I have no front row units anymore because I was able to get rid of them. But we are using the grade 1 skill to put into the Soul and Counter Charge 1, adding back the Obfuscate, calling out that little monster dude behind the Obfuscate. And then now, since we do have that other grade 2 order, all the grade 2s are going to be getting boost. So this cycle card is now a 10k booster. So we're kind of, I guess we're just kind of deciding what we want to commit to that board. It looks like it's going to be another Obfuscate. That's looking to be a pretty big column. It's not going to have the crit because obviously it wasn't called off an ability, but you know, it's still a very strong attack. And I am at 3, so it's looking like this could be a little bit of a rough turn for me, but of course I do have a ton of cards in hand, so I'm not really that worried about surviving this turn. Kind of just have to balance out how much damage I'm going to be taking. So it looks like we are going to be starting off with the grade 2 Obfuscate, swing for a clean 33. This is an on hit to counter charge, but I'm deciding I kind of want to bank on a defensive, which unfortunately doesn't happen, and we see a Panthero going to damage, which is a card that I would have preferred to definitely be in the drop zone, because it would allow me to actually build back a board, something that we really had some issues with last turn. And I'm not too concerned about the counter charge because he does have access to all the grade 1 orders, and it's not like he really needs them to protect his Obfuscates because I don't really have any retire in this deck. But the Ava is going to be swinging, just going to be PGing it, hit into a front trigger, which is definitely deadly. Going to be making all these attacks hit for really big numbers, and then comboing that off with a critical trigger. So both of these attacks are going to be swinging for lethal, meaning that I have to block both of these. So this first attack is going to be a 53 against my 13. That is going to be, I believe, a 45k guard. So thankfully, the front triggers are going to be coming in clutch here. I'm going to be guarding with 2 of them for 53, and then another 10k to hit that 58. I believe I might have gone to 63, but it is what it is. I want to keep that Ascendance Assault on board because a lot of my hand is low of attack value triggers, so I kind of want to keep that as an actual attacker instead of just committing it. But I do have the second Magnolia, so I am actually going to be able to ride, calling out the Goyledote and then putting the other Goyledote into the soul and giving my Vanguard another 5k. Unfortunately, I wasn't actually able to soul blast it last turn, actually soul blasting the Goyledote and then following it up with a what's it called, another Magnolia is actually pretty good. But as we are going to see here, I am going to have just a bunch of Goyledotes, which is not the greatest. They're fine attackers, but in this situation I would really prefer something like a Gnosla. But now I'm completely out of front, so I can just stick my two Grey 2s in the front and start swinging. Unfortunately, I'm only hitting 15, but you know, 15 is still a number. It hits for damage and it causes at least a 5k guard. So we're gonna be swinging the Magnolia, doing that triple drive. Unfortunately, hitting into an Inlet Pulse, which is really bad because it's a not shield value card, and then the worthless Friendship Fairy, hitting into another critical trigger and pushing my opponent all the way to 5. So now they do have to guard every single attack, swinging all 3 of these Goyledotes for 25, because even though you can't use the skill to draw unless it's in the center, you do still get the extra 10k power with this last swing. I think I actually made a mistake and I called it 35, but it is actually 40 because it was called by the Elaine skill. But of course, it's not really going to matter. My opponent is going to be using a perfect guard there. But as we see, the Ava player is slowly starting to run out of cards. I think we only have 4 cards left in hand now, but we did actually drop the Combine Rusher earlier in the game, so it looks like we are going to commit a counterblast to that. I mean, we have plenty of counterblasts, especially since we countercharged last turn. We still do have the orders, and we honestly can really afford it. But things are looking kind of rough for me. I have a lot of no shield value in my hand with that Inlet Pulse, and I did only drive check 1 trigger. I used 2 PGs in the last turn, so it might be kind of difficult for me to survive. I do technically have 20k on board with all those intercepts, but with the way numbers are looking this turn, especially with that Persona ride, we're gonna have to see how viable it is for us to actually survive. But we do see another one of the cycle card being used, counterblasting 1 and then adding the order card, playing the order card, and then we're going to check the top 5. Probably just going to be deck thinning. Looks like we see a lot of triggers, but looks like we're going to opt to just call the order in order to just kind of deck thin, because the deck is getting really thin and there are actually quite a few triggers left in deck. So it's really looking like I might not be able to survive this turn. But, you know, that's fine. Kind of just showing off Magnolia's power, but I think that it is kind of a viable-ish, like kind of a B or C tier deck right now, with the addition of Friendship Fairy, now that it can actually go as fast as some of the other decks. Being able to hit grade 4 like a turn earlier is just really impactful, and it really can do a lot of things, as we're seeing even in this video. But we do see a lot of numbers. Vanguard is hitting for, that's 23 under Persona Ride, and I believe we give another 10k from skills and the Blue Research Lab, so that's 33, and with the boost that's a 43. So it's 33 or 43 depending on whether we use the skills or not. But we do also have the Obfuscate. We have the 4 attacks. My ability to live is very much limited here, so we're just going to be swinging the Combine Rusher first, not boosting, swinging at my rear guard actually, which I was kind of glad for. It does technically reduce my shield, but my opponent has a pretty high chance of just winning it this turn. I kind of have to bank on taking the Vanguard swing and then guarding these other 2 Obfuscate swings, just because I can't really afford to commit like 2 to pass or 1 to pass to the Vanguard. And if my opponent gets a critical trigger here anyway, I probably won't be able to guard the other 2 Obfuscate attacks. So if they're gonna get a crit, I would rather it just like happen here. I do have a front trigger, a couple of heal trigger, and a couple of other triggers, but it looks like I am actually going to guard this first swing. So we're swinging, that's 38, 48. I believe that's a 1 to pass, and then we're gonna make this a no pass. If I believe, actually I think I'm pretty good at living this turn, so I think I still do have enough. But we are actually going to put the intercept in there to make it a 2 to pass. So opponent's going to be drive checking into a nothing and another front trigger, which is, you know, certainly wonderful for me because that means I have to block at least one of these attacks. I have to block this one that's already swinging once again for 53. I'm going to commit my OT, which I did draw into, and this last attack is going to be for 51. I just can take it. Unfortunately, hitting the other Panthero into the drop zone. Not actually hitting those Pantheros is really hurting me because those would have been 10k shields that I would have been able to commit. I don't actually have another Magnolia, but I guess I can call out the Inlet Pulse. But not being able to reride the Magnolia means I'm not really going to be able to commit or create that big of a board. I'm going to be calling that Friendship Fairy, which is going to be my Bass Attacker, and the Heal Trigger. Kind of just, this is going to be my last turn. I have to hit with everything I've got. I'm kind of deciding whether I want to swing with that card with the Heal Trigger, but really, realistically, there's not a huge chance of me hitting a trigger. And even if I did, my opponent I think they have enough cards in hand. Yeah, there's 5 cards or 6 cards in hand and double intercept. I think that they are very likely to be able to survive this turn. So I'm just going to boost the Vanguard. Hitting into a heal trigger, my opponent actually did Elementaria, and I completely forgot that you actually do get free Elementaria since I do have triple drive. Drive checking, I think that was an Inlet Pulse and a grade 4 Magnolia, which I would have rather had like a turn ago, but is now going to be just a clogged card in my hand. So swinging the 25, going to be calling 15k. So even though we are struggling a little bit, these are all 25k shield or 25k attacks, meaning that every single one of them is calling for at least a 15k guard, which is pretty good considering that the opponent is at 5 and they do actually have to guard every single attack. But we do see a little bit of a bad matchup because if you notice, a lot of my swings are swinging for 10k guards, and Ava is one of the good things about them is about the deck, I guess still, is that they are a deck that actually does have 10k shield in the form of those Obscadades. So even though I am swinging for very nice numbers, that 18, it's an easy block with just the Obscadade Interceptor guard from hand. But we do see the skill the Ava used, opting to not add anything because I think we saw all triggers at that point and it's not really worth it. But using the skill of the grade 1, just adding the Obscadade to hand and then calling it. So now it doesn't really look like there's too much I can do. These 2 Obscadades aren't we don't have a Persona Ride, so maybe there's a chance, but we still do have the 4 attacks, and I believe there's still another Obscadade left in deck. I think my only way of getting out of this is maybe a defensive trigger. It's going to swing at the rear guard, which I guess is fine. I think I probably would have just swung at the Vanguard since it is, you know, that's a 15k shield versus the 5k that you just took out. But at the same time, it does kind of deny defensives, and especially if you know you're going to be hitting a critical with your Vanguard. I can't really afford to block it this time, so we're going to be seeing a critical into a heal trigger, and of course I am going to drive check an Inlet Pulse and Elena, and that is going to be the end of the match. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to do all those YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.